Pekka. Having talked about Mega Knight and E-Barbs, it's only right to talk about the biggest op to these two, Pekka. This is the thing Mega Knight sees in its nightmares, and daymares, and everything in between. And also, the topic of this video. We'll talk about the basics, and then delve a little further, talking about her gameplay and playstyle, and how it connects to some of her synergies. We'll also talk about her counters and countered, and end off talking about her Evo, but also a lot of other stuff sprinkled in. As always, make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with these PowerPoints, and do other stuff that helps out, like liking and hyping the video, which is a thing, I guess. Also, make sure to join our Discord server and become a member if you have disposable income and want some cool perks. With the ads out of the way, let's get into the video. Let's start out with the basics. Pekka is the 7 elixir card, being slow, exactly half of the E-Barb speed at 45. However, what she lacks in speed, she more than makes up with damage, dealing 1186 damage per shot with a DPS of 658. Though she can only attack one troop at a time, which is quite a big weakness, and also can attack air cards. With the basics out of the way, let's talk more in depth about Pekka. Looking at her stats, her archetype is quite clear. She's the stereotypical slow tank. Easy to distract, but extremely dangerous if not defended properly. But speaking of defense, just like Mega Knight, she's honestly much better as a defensive menace than an offensive weapon. I think a great comparison to her is like a wall, or even that of a fourth tower. When it's placed down on defense, it's the very first priority to take out. If you don't take it down quickly, it can easily wreck your whole push, which is why she's so good against heavy pushes that don't involve swarms. If your opponent is rushing you down with something like a Hog Rider, Mini Pekka, and Magic Archer, a combo that's usually very expensive and dangerous to deal with, a Pekka can do really well just by itself. Against single target enemies, Pekka is extremely good, which of course is why she does so well against those types of pushes. She can often just one-shot or two-shot these enemies. Furthermore, you don't need fast movement speed on defense, so one of Pekka's biggest weaknesses is neutralized. Furthermore, despite seeming very expensive, being a 7 elixir card, Pekka often gets you positive elixir trades on defense, due to just how tanky and powerful the card is, being able to stop huge pushes with minimal help. Now, offense. Pekka is interesting when it comes to offense, and is quite similar to Mega Knight in that respect actually. She often is just used with counter pushing like Mega Knight, transforming from a defensive threat to an offensive threat. However, what she's actually so good for is an attack overload. What does attack overload mean? Well, I just came up with this term, but there's also probably some other way to say it. But it's basically just like a mega push, with you putting out all your resources for one big offensive push. Pekka is extremely good in pushes like this. In this situation, usually Elixir is at 2 or 3 times, so the enemy is usually well equipped for a push like this, and will put down some of their defensive beasts, like for example, a Mega Knight or a building. Your win condition can go for the tower, while the Pekka can take down the big defensive targets, or the buildings, and be supported when it comes to potential swarm counters. Overall, that's what Pekka is best used as on offense, a supportive tool. Your push should not be based around Pekka, but Pekka should be the backbone of your push, if that makes sense. It's another big similarity to Mega Knight, being a card that often is used at lower levels as a win condition, but the higher up you go, the more you realize that they're not the main character, and are the supporting side characters, sort of like Sasuke. Speaking of supporting and offense in general, let's talk about some of the synergies Pekka has. First off, and probably the most known, is Pekka Bridge Spam. Just like the name suggests, this is a deck with Pekka focused on bridge spam. The main thing with bridge spam is that it allows for offense and defense without Pekka, which is extremely important. It's a deck that is nearly completely functional without Pekka, which is very important for early gameplay, as you likely won't be able to use Pekka often to use on defense and offense especially. However, once 2 times Elixir hits, this deck earns its name. It's focused basically fully on bridge spam at that point, with the battle ram being the win con, and the support of course being Pekka. With extra cards like Bandit for extra damage and Ewiz for air control and ramping counter, this deck is both fashioned around the Pekka and functional by itself, leading to be one of the most famous decks of all time for a good reason. Let's talk about some more specific synergies with Pekka beyond this deck. One good example is with the Fisherman. Fisherman basically acts as the ultimate wingman, giving Pekka her targets instead of her having to spend ages walking to them, which, as I mentioned earlier, is one of her biggest weaknesses. Of course, this could go both ways. If the enemy plays a skeleton army, Fisherman will basically start rage baiting the Pekka by bringing random Larrys to her. Another interesting one that's also sometimes in bridge spam decks is Magic Archer. Magic Archer is honestly solid with any tank, as he can both help support them while attacking the tower at the same time. Though his niche is sort of taken over by the Firecracker, who's honestly a lot better. Anyway, Pekka being such a tank can allow Magic Archer, with good placement, to get crazy damage on the tower while being protected for a while also helping the Pekka with both air cards and swarm cards. Speaking of air and swarm cards, let's talk about Pekka's counters. As you all know, swarm cards absolutely cook Pekka. This is the main way to counter against the Pekka, and this is also why it's always essential to have splash cards in your Pekka deck, as well as at least 2 spells. Pekka is also pretty weak against air cards for obvious reasons, so she's especially weak against Minion Horde. Another counter is ramping cards, especially Inferno Dragon, who can wreck Pekka without even being seen, which is often why you'll see Ewiz or Zap in Pekka decks. Another pretty solid weakness of Pekka is anything that slows down the Pekka's movement, like electricity or ice. This is because Pekka is already a slow card, so making it even slower can either give you time to regain elixir and stall, or for your other cards to kill. In fact, Zappies basically hard counter Pekka, and render her almost immobile. A more general counter, or weakness if you will, is kiting. While kiting for Mega Knight is bad because you can often activate the King Tower, kiting for Pekka is bad because it just ruins her momentum. She's so incredibly slow that a simple ice golem will take her forever to kill, and add stuff like an ice spirit or skeletons, and she's been kited to another planet. This is yet another reason why she's so bad on her own. Even if you have a spell to counter something like Skarmy, your enemy can just stall and keep kiting the Pekka. By extension, Pekka decks are usually weaker to Psycho decks. Pekka is a card that's more focused on the slow aspect of things, slowly building up to a huge push. But oftentimes this can be taken advantage of by Psycho decks, such as Hog 2.6 for example. One of Pekka's most annoying cards to face is, interestingly, Cannon, as it costs so little elixir, and helps you take down your Pekka, while the Pekka can't even get close to it, with hundreds of ice spirits, skeletons, and ice golems blocking the way. On defense, Pekka decks rarely have a building, so you often are going into an elixir deficit when facing off against a Hog Rider. You could of course play the Pekka on the Hog and defend it cleanly, while also counter-pushing, but there is a big problem with that. Your opponent will likely have much more elixir than you, and therefore be able to comfortably defend, or at least keep stalling the Pekka until it's dead, while simultaneously defending any cards like Battle Ram with the cannon and whatnot. I mean, overall, it's just not a fun matchup for Pekka players. Even if you win, it feels like you're going through hell and back. Now, let's talk about some general strengths of the Pekka, because I've been bashing on her a little too much. First and the most obvious, she destroys other tanks. A lot of tanks are either 1. Win conditions, or 2. Don't deal a lot of damage. Well, Pekka fits into neither of these conditions, allowing her to basically hard counter the tanks who do, like Golem, the Giants, Mega Knight, and Giant Skelly for example. I mean, not only tanks, but Pekka's just generally good against any single target card, or tower is not named Inferno Tower, as long as you have a spell like Poison for example. She basically 1 or 2 shots literally all of them, which as I mentioned before, is especially good on defense, or when you want to support on offense. She overall doesn't have many specific strengths, but the ones she has are so general that they apply to a lot of the cards in the game. Now let's talk a little bit about Pekka's meta position. It's not really a card that falls off in the traditional sense. I mean, its stats are so unique that there isn't much beyond a gigantic nerf you can do to make her really fall off. So, she'll always have a niche. However, she isn't meta either, stuck in the limbo of a sort of B or C tier card, but overall pretty balanced despite having an Evo. Speaking of her Evo, Pekka's Evo sees her gain health based on the defeated unit's hit points, from 3.5 to 15%. This isn't a great Evo, as it simply just reinforces her strengths but doesn't do anything about her weaknesses. She's simply just stronger now against single target opponents, which she didn't really need, and especially tanks, but is just as weak against swarm cards like Skarmy. Though, the Evo did used to be much more broken before getting nerfed into the ground. Overall, Pekka is, well, Pekka. She's characterized by her slow movement speed, her tanky health, and her big damage. All of this leads to her interesting gameplay, being similar to Mega Knight in that she's best on defense, and as a support to more offensive cards like Battle Ram for example. This also leads to interesting matchups with other cards, especially when it comes to kiting, where she is made to look like a fool due to her slow movement. But overall, Pekka is just a solid, dependable card. Or in other words, Pekka. A huge thank you to NewGlance for helping me out with this video, and as always, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.